Let's bring in Shawn Simpson now. Love this guy. He knows that. I had the great pleasure of meeting him at the 2017 Grey Cup, and we've stayed friends ever since. Hey, Simmer, good to see you, my friend. Did you see our poll question? Let me just say, here it is. Which of these up-and-comer teams is the most for real? Senators, Red Wings, Flyers, Coyotes, or Canucks? They're all off to their best start in about a decade.
Well, first of all, Philadelphia, Arizona, and Vancouver are terrible. I'm not putting anything into those starts. Detroit's a bit of a surprise for me. I got to be honest with you, a little bit of goaltending. I've got Buffalo closer to Ottawa, but I'm not feeling Philly rolled through here, and honestly, I don't know how they're doing it. Smoke and mirrors. Arizona, great coach. Canucks off to a nice start. That's not sustainable. So as I said, between Detroit and Ottawa, the big thing is Mr. DeBrincat, unfortunately, and the way he's playing Rod right now. They are certainly flowing nicely. But I got to say, Ottawa, been pretty impressed with them so far. Only 3-2, but certainly one of the better starts that they've had in a long, long time.
Yeah, and they need it, don't they? The coach needs it. The GM needs it. And I find it a little interesting. You mentioned DeBrincat, though. He's averaging like 3 points a game to the start of the season. It's just ironic that he left one of these teams for the other. Who sustains it the longest, do you think?
Well, I think certainly he can. Do you mean as a team or individually?
As a team, which team stays in contention longer?
I still think Ottawa's. Yeah, I still think Ottawa's a little deeper. But again, Detroit. When you're riding on a shooting percentage like that, Rod, and when you're riding on a power play like that, I don't know. But as far as DeBrincat, quite simply, I don't think he was in shape last year, and certainly came in. The trade was a shock. It was crazy what was going on in Chicago. He got a head around, got a new contract. There's no doubting his talent. And one of the things we saw last year, Rod, without being a great skater, and his speed is better this year. The guy's a hell of a playmaker. He ran the half wall of the power play here last year in Ottawa, and you realize, hey, this guy's not just about scoring. He's a hell of a hockey player. So he's got in the right spot. They are basically that, the power play and a high shooting percentage. They're a nice hockey team, but I still at the end of the day think Ottawa is going to be better in the long run.
Well, we're only, as you know, 2 weeks into the regular season, and I can't pay attention to everything, but the Sens' opponents so far, have they had a soft schedule, a tough schedule? How would you typify that?
I would say it's right in between. Certainly that first game against Carolina, I thought, man, Carolina's not all that great. Then took over the second half of the hockey game. And then you had a measurement against Tampa Bay. You certainly had Philadelphia, a not very good Washington, then Detroit. So I'd say a mix. Certainly when you look at the schedule, Rod, they've got 13 games before they head over to Sweden, which is kind of a funny trip in itself. Not a huge fan of teams going to Europe in November. But of those 13 games, 9 are at home. So they certainly got to put up some points. You got to get people believing. What has been different this year, you certainly discuss and you break everything down, and at times the sky is falling, but there's no doubt their starts this year have been outstanding. Every first period, maybe half of hockey games, they've come out with some fire. They've controlled hockey games, and overall, I don't think there's a ton to complain about other than maybe some soft goals on Korpisalo against Detroit and Carolina. Outside of that, I've been pretty pleased with what I've seen, and that's without Shane Pinto in the lineup right now.
You and I are both goalie guys. It would be nice to see Ottawa settle on a goalie and go with him for years. Yeah. Because teams do that. Would you think they ever will in Ottawa?
Well, you hope so. But it was funny. I was looking this morning and I was thinking to myself, if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan, you've got this team that's kind of built to win. And I'm thinking, I don't think they've drafted a good goaltender since Andy Moog and Grant Fuhr in 80 and 81. Talk about goalie starve. Now, Cujo came through, Billy Ranford, and Billy won a cup, of course. But yeah, it has been tough here in Ottawa. Craig Anderson came in for 10 years, was very stable. Since he's left, you've had Matt Murray, you've had Talbot. I think at the end of the day, Forsberg's been a nice find on waivers. And I do like Korpisalo. But flat out, he's got to be better. These goals up top, short side, some of the things that are happening with him, you paid him to be a number one. I like the duel. I think it's enough to get into the playoffs. Is it enough to take them promised land? Probably a little premature to say that at this point.
I feel like you and I are just sitting in a coffee shop, and everybody watching, they can just go over there. It's just you and me, Simmer.
Yeah.
On the
now, was
goalie
that your boat?
thing.
Was that your boat? Was that your boat? Was that your boat in the clip? Are you doing your show from that?
You're the second guy to ask that today. I think that's not, but we're working on it. But talk about South Florida. It's so awesome here. Bob
really
is
the
man. Bob's the man. $10.5 million per year. And he can't do it alone, but he almost did it in the playoffs last year. How do you feel about finding a goalie? Like, I like what they did here. They picked what they thought was the best goalie in the league, and they paid him. That's not always going to work, and he hasn't always lived up to it, but he did in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, you know what? The problem is, like you said, the formula, Rod, it's not perfect. And you try to come up with, should you, in the case of Vasilevsky, have a big money goaltender? Absolutely. But Brodsky, let's be honest, they squeaked into the playoffs. Probably shouldn't have made it last year unless Pittsburgh crapped the bed against Chicago and Columbus. So I don't like the formula. I don't like the way he's played since he's arrived there. They're kind of smoke and mirrors. But everywhere you look, what's also so interesting, who would have thought in our lifetime? I'm a 68 vintage. I could argue right now that the 4 best goaltenders in the National Hockey League are all Russian. Sorokin, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, and I'll throw Georgiev in as a wild card. Who would have thunk? So, like I said, every formula when it comes to the salary cap, Connor Hellebuck's been great every year, but it feels like they run him into the ground come playoff time. Then you look at the craziness of what Vegas has put together. So I'm not big on a $10 million goaltender, not even big on a $9 million. You can get into that sweet spot of around 7.5 and have a capable backup is great. But without a doubt, I wouldn't want my starter playing more than 55 games in a year. I think if you want to have a playoff run, 55, 60 is the absolute max.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, just with the hockey guys down here, I'm talking about the Canadians that live here in South Florida, they said going into the playoffs last year, they're like, if Bob gets hot, he's going to make it all worth
for
it.
Sure. Yeah,
and he did.
Well, if worth it to get into the finals once, and I was with the Caps in '98, and Ole Kolzig led us to the finals, which is great. But I also knew at the time it wasn't sustainable. So if you do that one-off, like even Carolina, you win a cup with Cam Ward, and they had pretty good hockey teams. I say it's great. The Oilers and Flames went to the finals. Nobody will remember that, and it's just too hard. I'll say this, and I never believed it before, Rod. I think in the 32-team league, I do believe now if you're one of the 16 best, you've got an opportunity, but you got to get there. And that is the real difference that has happened now. It's not easy to make the playoffs in the National Hockey League where instead of 16 out of 21, we now end up having half of the teams are going to end up missing it.
But it helps if you have a stud goalie. And look at Colorado. They're 5-0 with the aforementioned Georgiev. So good for them.
Sure, yeah.
I guess they didn't go pay somebody. But listen, I got to ask you this, Summer, about Tampa.
Yeah.
This Vasilevsky news seemed to catch everybody off guard. And I think even maybe them. The Lightning. I'm serious. Yeah. So Coop says we're just going to eliminate, take it with the middle of the ice, eliminate cut down shot attempts and scoring chances. I'm like, that'll work for a week. Teams are going to figure that out. Can they do that, sustain until Vasilevsky's back?
Well, again, what I saw when they came in here, it didn't feel like it. When you look at their back end, I mean, it's not even close to what. And quite simply, I do think the long summer. I do think, and this night they didn't have Stamkos either, Rod. If they're healthy, I still think they're a good enough team to make the playoffs. But when you take the salary cap era, you look at kind of the all-in moves, I do think they're fresh. I think their top end is still awfully good. But when you start to look at the decay of the salary cap, some of the defensemen they've lost over the years, I think it'll be really tough to end up doing that. If you're Tampa Bay Lightning, I think all you're asking is, listen, keep it around 500, keep us in the mix, allow us to maybe in whatever that is, a final 60, then you're probably good to go. Just keep your head above water. I think that's all you're asking if you're Cooper at this point.
Yeah, but I think bad days are here for Tampa. Or what do you think? From what you said, you've seen
I don't think it's quite there yet. But again, I also a little bit careful, Rod, on how you kind of judge the division. I love to talk hockey every day like you do, but it's hard to. I don't know what to make of this division yet. Boston's lost a ton. They're off to a great start. Is that sustainable? The Toronto Maple Leafs, I don't think, helped themselves in the offseason with Domi and Bertuzzi and some of the other Klingberg, the moves they've made. So are they still real good? Probably win the division, yes. But then after that, where is Buffalo? Where is Detroit? Where is Ottawa? Where's Florida? I certainly don't have Montreal in the mix at this time. And then you look at Detroit. So I think the darn thing is so wide open that I wouldn't even want to forecast it at this point. All I'd say was this, hey, until somebody shows me they're better than Tampa, Toronto, and Boston, at least in the division, then I'm in wait-and-see mode. And early on, we see some signs, but let's get back to probably American Thanksgiving as you're on your boat carving up a big old turkey dinner there, and we can figure out where it's at. I think the division right now, with the salary cap world and all the changes that happen in an off-season, I think this thing, just like the rest of the league, I think it's absolutely wide open at this point.
Well, they were saying in the rink the other night that of the 8 teams in the Atlantic Division, 7 legitimately think they're a playoff team. Montreal's the only one that doesn't.
Yeah,
and there's just not enough seats at the table. So for them to beat the Leafs the other night 3-1, and by the way, do it handily and slap the Leafs around, and the Panthers feel pretty good about their team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for Paul Maurice and that whole crew, I mean, again, a team like Matthew Tkachuk, he showed last year, he's going to keep you in the fight all season. He's going to, his dad's calling out the team with 2 weeks left in the year, and all of a sudden they squeak into the playoffs. They eliminate the Boston Bruins. So I agree. I'd say 7 of 8. And again, at the same time, when you look at the Metropolitan Division, you've got the decline. Seeing Washington the other day just to shell themselves. Where is Pittsburgh? Certainly the Rangers aren't as good as they were in the playoffs. So could you end up with the crossover of 5 teams from the Atlantic at this point? I think that's a possibility. And like I said, that's the fun part of going into each season. Everybody gets excited about free agent signings, things that are happening. Without a doubt, within the division, you've got Ottawa, you got Buffalo, you got Detroit that are certainly moving up the charts. As to how fast they're going to move up, I guess we'll find out. I don't know what to make of Florida. And as I said, until you can unseat the big boys, then not much to talk about.
Absolutely. Always fun, Simmer. Appreciate it, man. Good seeing you. Keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rod. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Keep up great work, brother.
Thank you, man. Shawn Simpson, NHL, what should I say, personnel alum, TSN Ottawa alum.